A warm good evening to all. IEEE Kerala Section cordially invite you to the 20th talk of the Inter-Society Weekly Webinar Series on Nonviolent Transformation of Society. As we know that nonviolence is emerging as a topic of great significance in activist, academic as well as community spheres. It's being recognized as a necessary component of constructive and sustainable social change. And I want to point out that each one of us has to reject that pull of violence and choose to live a non-violent life and join the struggle to create a non-violent world. This philosophical, moral, and spiritual turning is the hardest step of all, the most courageous as well as the most needed. As more and more of us choose active, creative non-violence as a way of life, we have a chance of creating a more non-violent world. Yes, it's a time to begin our session. In order to welcome you all, I invite Professor Nandan S. representing Internet Society Trivandrum Chapter. Sir, please.
Good day all. Myself Nandan S., the Secretary of Internet Society India Trivandrum Chapter. Welcome to the 20th talk of the Inter-Society Weekly Webinar Series, jointly organized by IEEE Kerala Section, the Institution of Engineers Kerala State Center, Computer Society of India Trivandrum Chapter, Project Management Institute Kerala Chapter, Internet Society Trivandrum Chapter, Vakam Maulavi Foundation Trust Trivandrum, and IEEE Engineering in Medicine and Biology Kerala Chapter. It's indeed a pleasure moment for me to be here to welcome all of you to the 20th talk of the Inter-Society Weekly Webinar Series on Non-Violent Transformation of Society. So let me start with quoting a very famous message given by the most respected Mahatma Gandhi, father of our nation. Non-violence is a weapon of the strong. Yes, today's topic is of great significance these days. As we know very well that the ultimate way to solve human problems is with non-violence. So today, to speak about the non-violent transformation of society, we have with us Dr. P V Rajagopal, who is a Gandhian activist, former vice chairman of the Gandhi Peace Foundation and the president of Ekta Parishad. On behalf of all the organizing societies, professional bodies, and on behalf of all the participants here, I would like to extend a very hearty welcome to the most respected chief guest of the day, Dr. P V Rajagopal, sir. Welcome, sir. I'm also happy to welcome Jill Kerr-Harris, a Canadian fellow social activist and spouse of Dr. P V Rajagopal. Welcome, madam.
Thank you very much. Jai Jagat.
I would also like to welcome Mr. Harindra Laleji, the chair of Inter-Society Activities Committee of IEEE Kerala Section, who is the backbone of this webinar series. Welcome, Harindra, sir. Welcome to the session.
Thank you, Nandan.
I'm so happy and delighted to welcome our most respected and one of the senior most members of IEEE Kerala Section and backbone of Vakam Maulavi Foundation Trust, none other than Mr. Suhair AK. Welcome, Suhair, sir, to this function. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Nandan.
I would also like to welcome our senior most member, our mentor, Professor VK Damodaran, sir, to this session. Welcome, Damodaran, sir.
Thank you, Nandan.
I also extend welcome to Sajita Bashir, Aishwarya Ravi of CSI Trivandrum, Mrs. Akhila Gauri Shankar, and all the office bearers of IEEE Kerala Section, then Institute of Engineers, Computer Society of India, Project Management Institute Kerala, Internet Society Trivandrum Kerala Chapter, then Vakam Maulavi Foundation Trust, and IEEE Engineering, Medicine and Biology Kerala Chapter. Welcome all of you. Last but not the least, I would like to welcome all the participants here from 8+ countries, the session volunteers here, and all my dear friends to this wonderful session. Welcome you all once again. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Well, I know that before our session, we should get a clear intro about our speaker. In order to introduce the speaker to us, I welcome A. Suhair, representing Vakam Maulavi Foundation Trust, Trivandrum. Sir, please.
Good evening, everybody. Today, we have two fabulous speakers, Dr. P V Rajagopal, fondly called Rajaji, and Jill Carr Harris, his better half and a noted social activist. Rajaji, a former vice chair of Gandhi Peace Foundation, New Delhi, is the founder president of Ekta Parishad and also a prominent Gandhian activist. We at the Vakamalavy Foundation Trust remember him as the first recipient of Professor N.A. Karim Award presented by the Vice President of India. When the jury examined a number of nominations, the chair of the committee, Dr. Iqbal, he commented that all the candidates are good and have worthy contributions, but the committee, consisting of Professor V.K. Damodaran, Padma Shri Shankar, and many others, eminent people, wants to ascertain the impact of their service. What is important was not the service, but how it affects the people around you and how stretched the service is. So the search was extended and the right candidate spotted. It was Rajaji. Rajaji had received many awards before and later also, and he continues his journey, and we wish him all the best in his journey. In an evening party conducted on the award day, Jill addressed the young women, told them in a very forceful manner to make use of their academic knowledge for social change. That was a brilliant talk that motivated the young ladies. Rajaji was born in a freedom fighter family in Kannur, started his early phase of social work with famous Jayaprakash Narayan and Subbarao. He boldly walked into the dreadful Chambal Valley and disarmed 578 dacoits. Can't imagine. Not an easy job. Later, his attention turned to Adivasis, bonded laborers, and landless people suffering from poverty and exploitation. Can you imagine that in India, 300 million people, 30 crores of people are landless. And in Northeast, 60% of the population are landless. So to own a small piece of land to have a habitat, the struggle undertaken by Rajaji is admirable actually. He trained thousands of young rural young people in the villages. He conducted many historic padayatras. In 2007, 25,000 people walked from Golia to Delhi. In 2012, the number stepped up to 100,000 people. In 2018, 1 million people. And 2020, he's planning a Jai Jagat Yatra from India to Geneva, Switzerland. So that's a kind of spirit and energy and enthusiasm Rajaji is showing. He's a member of many coveted bodies, national and international committees and legal forums. He's commissioned by the Supreme Court of India, National Council of Land Reform, so many. It is very difficult to list all the positions he has, responsibilities he has taken. So he's continuing his journey unbridled with a lot of enthusiasm. We are very much lucky to have him. We are also eager. We also want to learn from Rajaji the tricks to mobilize people. We are trying difficult to get even 25 people for a meeting. He is mobilizing 1 million people, so that we are keen to know the secrets behind that one and how to win the trust of people. So we look forward to a great session from Rajaji and Jill. Over to you, Rajaji, for your talk. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're on, and your photos.
Thank you, Suhairji. So first of all, I want to thank the Inter-Society Weekly for organizing this session. And I also want to thank my dear friend Suhair for inviting me to talk today. Right? So thank you very much. Is that okay? The sound is okay, Suhelji? Sound
Yes,
is
sir.
okay?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Oh, good.
Sound is perfect.
All right. So I'm going to begin, and then Jill will follow. And from the program, I am also happy to notice that Ashish will be speaking next week. Wonderful. So you have very interesting, very committed people who are going to speak to the audience. So the subject for today is nonviolent transformation of society. So let us underline the word nonviolence and transformation of the society, right? So what does it mean? It means transforming the society by using nonviolence as a method, of course, but creating a society based on nonviolent values. Otherwise, it is not useful. If you only use a method to transform the society, and then the society that you create is not based on the values of non-violence, then this is not going to be of much use, because you are only using a method to transform from a difficult situation to a good situation. But then the good situation will not last too long, because the values are not the values of non-violence. That's the problem. So that's where Gandhi, reference to Gandhi is very important, because Gandhi used non-violent method in his struggle against the British. For him, non-violence was not just a method. You know, it was more like a lifestyle. You know, it's like it's not that I will use non-violent method to fight you, but then later on I will use all kinds of methods to rule my own people. Then you don't have to question. So how do you bring about non-violence as a way of life, rather than non-violence only as a method to fight? So when you look at Gandhi, you understand that he is taking from the nature what is necessary. You know, it's like living on minimum. You know, it's not an exploitative lifestyle. There is this famous story that when he and his friends went to a river for taking a bath, he took a small bucket of water and started washing himself, and somebody said, "Look, here is the river. Why don't you swim? Why don't you make use of all this water?" He said, "No, for Gandhi there is only one bucket, because there are millions of people who need water." So this understanding that you should only take what is your need, or what you can take from the nature, considering that there are many more people in the world, and this nature is not only for you, is a great understanding of Gandhi, and we are losing sight of that. And then he also lived very simple, you know, like an ordinary person. When you go to Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh and ask people, why do you love Gandhi? Especially ask Adivasis, why do you love Gandhi? And they will say, look, Gandhi is like us. He has a small cloth, he lives in a small hut, so we can identify ourselves with him. So the simple life, that is a non-violent way of life, that is very important. And you know that he said, as long as everyone in India will not have electricity, I will not use electricity. And his famous quote, that live simple so that others can simply live. You know, this way of life. So for him, it is not just a method. You know, it's not just a method that we will use non-violence to fight the British. But when we get the country in our hand, we will live lavishly, because it's our country, we can do whatever we want. So for him, it was a way of life, non-violence, and that need to be understood very clearly. Otherwise, we will always say Gandhi used non-violence for fighting British, and without looking at other aspects of Mahatma Gandhi and what he was trying to tell us. See, when Gandhi invented these small methods like charkha, spinning wheel, and salt, These are methods that are very close to the poorer section of the society. A spinning wheel goes deep into the village. A handful of salt means for ordinary people, salt is very valuable. If there is nothing else, it is salt and rice. So he was able to identify the most important aspects touching the poorest section of the society and kindle their imagination for revolution. Right? This is very interesting how you use very, very small symbolic methods and kindle the imagination of very poor people for a non-violent movement for freedom. But he is not only using methods, he is not only introducing salt and chakka as a method, but he is also giving a transformative agenda, a non-violent transformative agenda. So he is speaking about when you get freedom, what you should do. Think of the poorest of your country. Whenever you make a plan, whenever you design a policy, think of the poorest. He is speaking about greed and need. His famous quotation, there is enough for everyone's greed and not enough for everybody's need, not enough for greed. What he is suggesting is that please go for a development model that is not greed-based, but need-based. And that is how you transform a society into a non-violent society. He's also speaking about mass production and production by masses. A production method where you are able to involve millions of Indians so that they can use their capacity rather than engaging machines and making money for few companies. And finally, he's also speaking about means and ends. For him, ends are important, but then means are as important as ends, he says. So Gandhi used non-violent methods for mobilizing people and struggling against the British. But Gandhi at the same time is proposing an agenda that will transform India as a non-violent society, right? If you engage everybody, if you look at the poorest section of the society, if you are on a need-based development model, then you are probably leading to moving into a non-violent society, creating a non-violent society. So that was very, very important. But we, after freedom, we didn't listen to Gandhi, and we created a model that's a top-down economic model promoting injustice at every level. We took to a development model that is creating climate crisis, and we are facing it today. We accepted a governance model that is creating more conflict and violence in the society. We accepted an agriculture model that is poisoning our own children. Now look at it. I mean, the vast list of activities in which we are involved are all against what Gandhi wanted us to do. So as a result, rather than creating, see, we are all very proud of our freedom struggle, and we keep telling all over the world, look, we got our freedom through non-violent methods, etc. But we are now educating our children to perpetuate violence through every aspect of life. We are perpetuating violence and creating a very violent system. So that is why today it's important to understand that transforming the society to be a non-violent society is very, very important. Please understand that people who are committed to violence are working very hard to promote hate, aggression, and violence. This is their business. Day in and day out, these people are just doing one thing, promoting hate, aggression, and violence. And we who believe in a non-violent society, non-violent way of life, are nowhere near to our commitment is nowhere near to contain that process. So there is a huge gap of people committed to crime and violence working very hard, and people who are committed to non-violence and a non-violent society are going very, very slow. See, people who believe in violence have a lot of backup system. They have a toy industry producing toys for children, and they learn from day one how to use a gun. And these are the popular toys. They have a film industry where the villain and the hero will come out with gun in hand, and the audience will clap when they shoot. They have a industry that is producing song that will basically whip up your nationalism, and then see all your neighbors are your enemies, and you need to really use violence against these people. And they also get your classrooms and create a vocabulary for our children, where they believe using power is the right way to do. They introduce drugs. They introduce all forms of violence. It's like what we should understand: the people who are committed to violence are transforming the society according to their belief. They need hate, they need conflict, they need violence, and you can see it all around in every country. Because I know there are audience from other countries also. This is not for India. We have let our children into the hands of these people who promote violence, hate, and aggression. So this is time for us to seriously see that we want to transform our society as a non-violent society. This is not just a subject for a webinar, but this is something very important today, that can our children be in systems where they learn violence, where they learn corruption, where they learn disrespect for others, and perpetuate those values. United States is a great example of when you read in the newspaper that almost every week shooting in the classrooms. Children come with their gun, small arms, and when they disagree, they start shooting. So many children are killed or dead through this process. Now, when Obama stood for election for the first time, you remember that he said, "Look, if I become the president of United States, I will bring an act called Small Arms Control Act." And he stayed in the office for 8 years, but he was not able to bring about this act called Small Arms Control Act. This is a clear indication that the arms lobbies are much bigger, much stronger than the president of India. So, United States, president of the United States. So we need to really seriously look into it and see how to contain these forces. See, for some time, Jill and I, we were into speaking about a non-violence lens. It's like the gender lens, the environmental lens. So we went around the world talking to leaders, saying that, look, why don't you introduce a non-violence lens in your planning process? So right away you can go look through and understand whether the projects and programs that you are going to undertake are going to create a peaceful society or a society full of violence and conflict. So we explained it, we wrote out this proposal, we wrote out this concept, and we gave it to many people. They said yes. But we didn't go very far because we wanted them to know that when you introduce, when you ask the company to come and start coal mining, please see whether this coal mining will create more conflict and violence or peace. Whether it is road widening or dam construction, you should use this lens to look through. Ultimately, only the Rajasthan government in India agreed to set up a department for non-violence and peace, and we are now trying to work with them. But we also have an offer from the municipality of Geneva, where they said that they can consider using this lens. So this is a good news. I see. In fact, our discussion began by saying we should have a peace ministry. See, if you can have a defense ministry that is more into war and buying up arms, you can have a department for police. Why shouldn't a country have a peace ministry? Why there is no resources for peace, whereas you have so much money and resources for promoting war and paying for police people, etc. So that's a very, very important area, that while we try to promote a peaceful society from the bottom, at the top also, we should continue to have this argument, continue to have this advocacy, so that it works from both ends. Now,
Rajaji, please check the audio.
Your audio is not good. Okay.
it's okay now.
Now it's okay.
It's okay, and I was okay up till now, or
Now it's
the
okay.
last part was not clear. No, it's okay.
Not clear.
So I was trying to say.
Get your picture, Mike.
Now it is okay,
Yeah, yeah.
but
So now
little before it was not
Now-
okay.
Yeah, so I was trying to say that we are using this idea of speaking to leaders in different parts of the world about a non-violence lens, because we think like gender lens or environment lens, this non-violence lens can be used to determine that whether the policies and programs or the activities that the government is introducing will create peace in the society or more conflict and violence. So ultimately, finally, the Rajasthan government agreed that they will start a department for peace and non-violence, and we are working with them. We also have some kind of a commitment from the municipality of Geneva that they will also try to look at this idea of introducing a peace lens to avoid conflict and violence in the society. In fact, we began our discussion with the government by saying, look, we should have a ministry of non-violence and peace. If you can have a ministry for defense, if you can have a ministry for police, you can also have the resources to set up a ministry for peace and non-violence. So the argument is that on one side, we have the responsibility to educate our young people and our children about non-violence and transforming the society into a non-violent society. But we should also talk to people at the top and help them to understand that they also need to accept this idea of introducing policies and programs through looking at through a non-violent lens. Now, there are very interesting examples. You know, it's like a good example comes from Armenia. You know, Armenia, after a non-violent struggle and non-violent transfer of power, they have there are groups now working on. They are doing a study on roots of violence. You know, they are trying to understand. These young people are trying to understand what are the root causes of violence. So they are looking at the social system. They are looking at the political system. They are looking at economic system. They are looking at educational system. So they really want to know where is violence coming from. These are the systems which are perpetuating violence. So if we look at our own country, in different countries, you will see that the economic system is totally violent, a top-down violent system. And the political system is very violent. Social system is violent. Educational system is violent. So through this economic, political, social, educational system, how do you create a non-violent society? So we will have to understand where is violence coming from, what are the root causes of violence, and deal with it. This is not going to happen just by speaking. You know, these are not public speaking which will bring about a change. The change will come when we look at the root causes of violence and try to address each one of them, the economy and all other areas. Now in Belgium, we were invited to a university where we were working with young people to see education and non-violence. Because we know these are these educated young people who will go out into society, and if they understand that each subject they learn need to be connected to non-violence. Otherwise, it is going to create problem for the society. If the young person doesn't know, there is also a non-violent economy. That economy need not be an aggressive, cutthroat business, but there is also a non-violent economy. Or he or she knows that development need not be at the cost of displacing millions of people. There is also a non-violent way of development by making it participatory. If they know media need not be so sensational and promoting violence, there is also a non-violent media possibility, or a non-violent agriculture without poisoning the food, etc., etc. So, application of non-violence, that is what it's called. You know, this is like, if young people know that as an educated, I should do it with an understanding that I don't perpetuate violence in the society. So, every subject need to be understood from a perspective of non-violence, and that is very important for every university, every college. In Norway, it's an interesting experience where the government initiated a discussion with the prison authorities and media people, and told the prison people to transform people rather than punish people. The media people were requested not to publish sensational, violent news. And if you believe the news, this was published in the Time magazine, that they were able to bring down violence by 50% in that country, just because the media cooperated, and also the prison authorities started behaving differently. You must have read about this transition movement in Europe. You know, they are trying to transform the society because they feel unless people start behaving differently, they can't transform the society. So people are now back to bicycle, people are into sharing car, people are into organic farming, people are into ethical banking. So there is a huge behavioral shift among the people and also in communities, so that rather than an aggressive, cutthroat economic process, how do we change our behavior so that the society can be transformed into a non-violent society? So this is not a magic, you know. It's like when I say transforming the society into a non-violent society, kindly don't misunderstand it as a magic. It is hard work. And we need to commit for this hard work, and this hard work at the thought level, thinking level, at the planning level, at the implementation level. So there are many people who need to be involved if we really want to make our society, convert our society into a non-violent society. Otherwise, we will continue to live in a very violent society, creating so much violence that ordinary people will find it very difficult to live in this society. So, why I argue this? Why I speak about this? Because a non-violent transformation will last long. A violent transformation will not. Because in non-violent transformation, there are no losers. You know, what do you lose? In fact, you know, everybody is gaining. In a transformation where many people are losing and some are gaining, there will be, of course, a lot of conflict and violence. And non-violence lifestyle can answer the challenge of climate crisis. And this is a winning proposition, that by a violent lifestyle, if you are destroying the planet, through a non-violent lifestyle, if you can take care of this challenge that we are process. A non-violent development model will reduce conflict and violence in the society. If you travel through countries like India, you will understand most of the conflict and violences are in areas from where resources are taken from the poor people. Their land, forest and water are taken for multinational, national companies. So the conflict and violence will come down in a big way if we introduce a non-violent development model. A non-violent governance model will provide more justice to to the poor people and needy people. So transforming the society through non-violence and also transforming the society to be a non-violent society is going to benefit everyone. So, but what is the problem? The problem is because as we are a victim of this particular model in which we live today, we accept that there is no other possibility. You see, this is, we are conditioned. We are conditioned to believe that this is the only way and this is the only model available. So what is missing is imagination. See, important is to imagine a different possibility. You know, like many people say, another world is possible. So this, even to imagine that another world is possible where everybody can get justice, everybody can get bread, this is something difficult for people to believe. So we need to make people believe. Gandhi could imagine. Gandhi could imagine, okay, through non-violence we can get freedom. Martin Luther King could imagine. Nelson Mandela could imagine. And even a small country like Bhutan could imagine. You know, that when everybody is rushing for one set of profit-centric development model, we will go for a happiness-centered model of development. So finally, I want to say, before I invite Jill to speak, see, COVID-19 is asking us to wake up. There is no better challenge than what we are facing today. COVID-19 is asking us to wake up and get out of this violent model, because this model has no future. Everybody is accepting that this model has no future. So when we know that clearly, even if we don't listen to Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, COVID has come and asking us to wake up. So this model has no future. So imagine a new way of life, a non-violent way of life, and non-violence, people to people non-violence, people to nature non-violence. So I strongly believe that we have gone a long way in the wrong direction, but even now, this is not too late to correct. So if we really imagine this possibility of transforming into a non-violent society, using non-violent method in moving into a non-violent society, that should be possible. So I will end with that and will invite Jill to take it from there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Jagat. Can people,
let them say something?
can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
No problem, huh?
No problem.
It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this seminar. I think this subject of nonviolent transformation of society is so important at this moment in time. The area that I just want to touch on, because I think Rajagopal has given a very wide view of what this may look like, is I'm very interested in the whole area of education. And how do we bring nonviolent methods to teachers, to students, to young people, and also to adults in non-formal and adult education. And I just wanted to add this because we had been involved in a Jai Jagat campaign to work on bringing greater awareness of nonviolence for many years, and it continues. But what we found were some very interesting developments, which I just want to share a few with you. We were planning to walk from New Delhi to Geneva, and in fact, we walked 6 months and got to Armenia before the COVID crisis. So we had to turn back. But what we did by way of preparation is we had visited schools and teachers all along the route of those 10, 11 countries. And one of the worst example of violence, you would be surprised to know, was in Switzerland, one of the wealthiest societies in the world, in one of the wealthiest areas of Switzerland, outside of Geneva. And what they were so concerned about was bullying and children becoming so aggressive that they wanted us to, through the Jai Jagat campaign, to bring greater nonviolent awareness. And surprisingly, once we did a number of nonviolent trainings in preparation for what was to be the Jai Jagat March, was that they began to say, oh, so this is not just a technique, what we would call nonviolent communication, which has become a well-popularized technique. But it's more than that, that we need to look at how to change behavior. And deeply embedded in curriculum and classroom learning, we need, as teachers, to learn what nonviolence means, what it is to exemplify, be an exemplar of nonviolence, so that young children and children will grow up with models other than those models which they have, which clearly, as Rajagopal indicated, there is so many models which children are seeing that are very violent. And we were quite stunned. And what we did is we connected this Swiss group, this Swiss set of schools in a district, because the whole district was interested in the nonviolent behavioral change, is we linked them to a group in Canada which had trained teachers, a large number of teachers in nonviolence. You know, it was part of teacher education. So the teachers themselves had already spent time thinking about how do I bring this into the classroom. And I won't go into any great depth. I'm going to leave after I speak, I will give you the link where you can check this out. But there are many examples how teachers have realized that they can go beyond curriculum and bring nonviolence into the training. An example that I was very delighted to see was a class, fifth standard, sixth standard class, which the students themselves wanted to look at cyber kindness as a way to offset cyberbullying. And they began to become cyber kindness promoters, doing films, talking to other students, going around to other schools, and talking about how do we use social media so we're not using it to identify people's weaknesses or get into the realms of hate speech or competitive ideas about image building, but that we try to look at it as an instrument to build cooperation and kindness. And this was coming from a grade 5 and 6 class. And there are many other examples of how teachers have tried to make these changes. So what I'm trying to say with these small examples, because I'm giving micro examples to give you the understanding that if we can begin to change education and school curriculum to see the values, Gandhi's values, of course, values of nonviolence, values of a more moral civic virtue, if you will. If we can see how these get embedded by leaving the teachers to take the initiative and, of course, build up, as Gandhi said, the whole child, and allow them to not feel forced, but to find the way to facilitate those impulses in a child, we will make a big difference. And in the course of this Jai Jagat, I would just like to say that we also got in contact with groups like the Medina Institute, which is in South Africa teaching Islamic and Arabic studies. And they're really deeply interested in how to build peace within their student body. And they've come to the Jai Jagat to get training, to get understanding, and to share their dilemmas with us. We've also been working with critical pedagogists. Those are people who follow Paulo Freire's idea of, you know, a certain kind of education that enables hidden curriculum to be identified so that everybody feels part of the learning process. So the Jai Jagat was able to attract a wide number of pedagogists, teachers, and continues to do that. And I think that this is extremely important if we're going to lay the grounds of peace. I think Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk who teaches peace who's right now in Vietnam, but long years in France and the United States, he said that only if we can put water on those seeds of nonviolence in the child will we get nonviolent attitudes in their adult life and in the spatial communities and societies. And I think it's a very important observation. I just want to draw this to a close, but before I do, I want to talk about the non-formal education, which is the bigger part of the work that we have done, both in India and abroad, working not only with middle-class people, but also people marginalized sections, how to bring nonviolence to them. And, you know, clearly the issue is to identify exploitation, but it's also to identify how they can realize their potential through self-help and through nonviolent action. I think the marches, which was mentioned earlier in introducing Rajagopal, was one example of how to bring poor landless communities together into nonviolence and create an understanding of their power. But let me give you two important examples outside of India for those who are not from India. One was in Colombia. We did a non-formal training on nonviolence with Afro-Colombians who have been 6 million people were displaced from their lands in Colombia because they were former African through the slave trade that had come to Colombia, become citizens, and were perfectly able to claim land, but companies came and took their land away. And they were in terrible violence, which is why Colombia went through 53 years of an underground civil war. Recently in 2016, and thankfully, they've signed a peace agreement. But what was clear for us when we went at the time of the negotiation of the peace agreement and trained people in nonviolence was to see how, for these Afro-Colombian friends, nonviolence made perfect sense because they were needing the techniques and ways of training their young people in dealing with groups, both statal, violent groups of the state, as well as violent groups of others, narco trafficking groups. They needed ways to deal with violence. And I think that the kind of nonviolent training programs had a good impact on helping them to deal with it. So even if you get a peace treaty, you also need to have a population that can act out nonviolence. And the final example that I would like to give, because I know time is short, is we were with Indigenous women in Canada, helping in a training in a complete remote forest area of what was Manitoba, a central state in Canada. And the women and daughters were meeting to understand women's leadership. And what was so clear by their inviting us to give some ideas of nonviolence and Gandhian's nonviolence and what does it mean, is they were trying to change the violent relationships of Indigenous people in Canada so that they could get out of the cycle of violence and be different. And I'm very happy to say that one of those women that was trained later participated in the what is known as the water spiriters. These are women that walked around water bodies in Canada trying to show the sacred nature of the water in Canada as we are very rapidly polluting and killing our water resources, not understanding that they are the base of our survival. And these indigenous, various indigenous groups, First Nation women groups in Canada, because of their understanding of nonviolence, took up the leadership of helping Canadians to understand that this is a renewable resource, but can become non-regenerative without the proper care. And this this kind of leadership came because of the deep appreciation for nonviolence and a nonviolent relationship with the earth. So these were some of the examples of non-formal education with very depressed and marginalized groups for people to come and to see the importance of nonviolent transformation, not only for our survival, but for peaceful and human coexistence. So I'm sorry to just leave you at that. There's a lot more to cover, but let us cover that in the question period. I turn it over to you, Sahilji, to lead the questions. And I thank you very much. I turn on the camera now because I know the connection is not good, but I want to thank all of you for listening and sharing. And I hope that we can all work towards understanding more this area of nonviolence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Such a nice session it was. And society needs people like you, sir. Okay, sir, we have so many questions in our chat box. Let me point out some questions. First question is that, what are those actions we should do now to make things in the right direction? Sir, did you hear that question?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, sir.
And so this is it's an important area because this is related to action. What should we do in order to correct? Because at different levels. So what we are doing now is at two levels. One, training young people at the grassroots level. It's like people who are left behind, who are losing their resources, land, forest, water. So this is important for them to understand that they can use a non-violent method to struggle, because we don't want this economic reality to drive them to a situation whereby they decide to use violence against the state. So one immediate thing for every country, whether it is Colombia or Kenya or India or Bangladesh or Nepal, one important thing is to help young people to understand that they can use non-violent method to act against many of these policies and decisions, which Sohailji said that I organized 25,000 people marching to Delhi or 100,000 people marching to Delhi is because we want to scale up non-violence. You know, it can 10 people can act non-violently, but then how do you get 100,000 people to act non-violently? So it need to go through a very important training process so that we don't throw our young people or our people who are already into poverty and suffering into violence. So one important area is that let all of us commit our time and resources and energy to work with people who are left behind, especially after COVID-19. We have seen millions of people walking back. And tell me, walking back to what? You know, their resources are grabbed by multinational, national companies, and they have nothing back home. So the frustration will be very high. And this is the time for us to contain this frustration and see how do we help these people not to sit down quietly and say, look, everything is okay, but resist non-violently. And this is where we say the understanding of poor people need to change. You know, we very often look at poor people as helpless people, etc. But then we begin with the idea of power of the poor. See, poor people are economically poor, but they are rich in terms of their socio-cultural reality, the spiritual reality. They are very, very strong. So economic poverty can be tackled if you organize the socio-cultural power, the energy of people. And we should also believe in the youth power and bring that with solidarity across the globe. So people who are organized because of poor people, young people, using non-violence, then the solidarity can come around. So we have a big work here in front of us today, that how do we address this problem of huge poverty and suffering at the rural level in every part of the world. The second area is that we need to really speak to the people who are running different countries in the world. You know, it's like they very farmers are protesting. And what is the business of police in between farmers and government? Farmers need a negotiating place where they can speak about their problems. Adivasis are asking for land. Why send police? You know, police is not the answer for all the problems of the world. And our people who are running the state, they believe that we can sit quietly in the office and use the police to deal with all these agitations. So they also need to learn now that they have a different responsibility. They need to come out, they need to talk, they need to understand the problems, etc. So my position will be, especially after COVID-19, huge responsibility in terms of organizing the society to act non-violently and dialogue with the state and actors with the state to be more and more positive in their attitude to people who are suffering and struggling. If we can play this role, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about mediation, that, you know, somebody need to mediate this two processes. You know, the poor people demanding for land and livelihood resources, and people who are making policies giving all the resources to multinational national companies. So somebody need to now mediate, whether they are in India or in Bangladesh or in Kenya or Brazil. So we need to mediate. So this is a very, very important role. Other than what Jill said, you know, you need to get to schools and colleges where young people are learning bullying and abusive languages and the language of power, and, you know, so they are really into believing that if we want to survive in this world, the only way is to use violence. Only way is to use bullying or power. And from there to move them to believe non-violence is a very, very powerful instrument, and non-violence is the way that you can create a non-violent world order. So this is a lot of work. I mean, thank you for asking that question, but I can only say there's a huge task in front of us, and let us face it. Jay.
I think there's more questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is that, do you think that economic prosperity of a society has an effect on the violent nature of people?
Yeah, economic prosperity, like Gandhi said, means and ends. So how do you bring about this prosperity? If the prosperity is for all, it's good. But if you have seen the latest report, where it says 1% of the people are controlling 58 to 60% of the world's resources or wealth, is not a distribution of resources or opportunities. So this is happening in every country. So how do you guarantee that prosperity or happiness for all? Otherwise, this prosperity, this kind of prosperity for some, and poverty and suffering for millions, will only lead to conflict and violence, because people will wait for some time, and if they don't get justice, you see, recently the head of the Department of Indian Studies in the University of Pennsylvania was in India, and then in an interview he says, look, these are all okay. You have new planning commission, you have now new women's commission, you have a commission for child, etc. These are all buildings. You can have big board and big buildings and big collectorate and big police stations, but buildings are not going to provide justice. Justice will come from people who occupy the power in that office, and if they are not ready to provide justice, then the people are going to get disappointed and violence is going to come. So institution building and colleges and schools producing millions of educated people and prosperity, this is not going to answer the question. The question is, how is the prosperity distributed among population, how opportunities are divided among the population, and how sensitive people are who are occupying the seat of power in terms of delivery of justice. So this is very, very important that we look at economic prosperity from that angle. Yeah.
I think also, if I could just add one point, that Gandhi and we're also seeing this in many ways today, is this notion of trusteeship, is for people who have become prosperous and affluent to be able to use their wealth in a way, not for them to give all of their wealth away, but to understand that their greater society as well, and that they are a trustee of money and property, and they need to see other people's interest and not just their own. And we have really come far away from this notion of trusteeship. We still have trusts, as Volcamy Foundation Trust is a trust. So we do have trusts that are acting this out to some extent as organizations. But the attitude of being a trustee and not just setting up corporate social responsibility, because what I'm really talking about is seeing one's wealth as for the greater good. And to the other thing, in making money, to make sure that you're not doing it in a way that is injuring others. One has to be conscious of both making money and the use of holding money in trust for others. I think this notion of Gandhi is something that more and more people are seeing as necessary, that we cannot just depend on the state for redistribution of resources. But we must, as human beings, take that responsibility as well.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. So we have another question. Can you suggest what we can bring into our daily communicating to students to reinstate the concept of non-violent mode of living?
See, we all know in the field of education, what is important is to understand that for children, parents are their hero to begin with, but soon the teachers become their hero. And they learn not by what you teach, they learn by seeing what the teacher does. So unfortunately, our teachers are not trying to model themselves. See, a non-violent behavior needs to be modeled. No? How do you talk to each other? How do you behave with people? How do you receive people? How do you communicate with children? So one important area is our teachers and their capacity to model with an understanding that they are the heroes of a large number of students, and they need to be very, very different. The second thing is to what we say, the community-generated knowledge. Now, we believe that knowledge comes from textbooks and classrooms. And Gandhi said, look, I mean, a knowledge that is coming from community is more powerful. You know, why shouldn't we learn about our village, our history, rather than only learning from the textbooks? So, and then when you learn from the society, you become more sensitive to the carpenter. When you become more sensitive to the farmer, to the blacksmith, because then you start believing that they have knowledge and they are much more knowledgeable than you are. And then you start respecting poor people and farmers. And the teacher also has the responsibility to bring the farmer and the carpenter to the classroom and introduce them as very important people. So the whole educational system today is not modeling anything. It is just telling people, look, if you have a computer and a laptop and a mobile phone, you are great. And all those guys who are in the village toiling are stupid. So this is not the way to educate. And this educational system has really done great harm to the mindset of people. And when they occupy seats of power, they behave with these poor people in a way as if they are criminals. So the teaching community and the schools and colleges have a lot to do. And that is one experience of Armenia, where young people are now looking at roots of violence. And what is the roots of violence? In our own school, where is violence coming from? In our own society, where is violence coming from? So teachers, rather than depending on this textbook-centered education, if they can go to a life-centered education process, then they will see a lot more possibility in life to learn from.
I want to say that we just went, as I mentioned earlier, on a Jai Jagat march for 6 months with 50 international people, many of them young. So when you ask, what is the daily learnings that make someone more nonviolent, we found in that 6 months, as we walked 2,500 kilometers through central India, walking from village to village, from town to town, from city to city, that people could really, the young people with us could see what was working, what was not working by exposure, by learning, by talking to people, by evaluating themselves. And what one of them kept saying over and over again is, you know, especially in the indigenous areas where we were walking, boy, indigenous people have a lot to teach us with their traditional knowledge systems for how to be better with the planet. We better watch what they do in order to get some tips, not so we become like them living in a tribal hutman, but rather learn from them and value their knowledge and value them for who they are. And I think this was an example to say that if you awaken yourself to the society around you, the social, environmental aspects around you, that you will find knowledge and you will see who has the wisdom, and you can learn a lot. And teachers and schools need to provide that opportunity for young people to grow both in terms of their physical, mental, and affective domains, you know, from their heart, their head, and their hand as well. So these kinds of learning processes are very rich in getting an understanding of nonviolence.
Okay, thank you. We have so many questions in our chat box, but due to the time limit, we want to wind up our session. Sir, but before that, I want to ask a final question. Sir, now our political leaders are saying one thing and they are practicing another. There is no purity in their word, deed, or thought. So, what is your opinion about that?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question in terms of what you say and what you do. The manifesto says something and people do something else. You know, you make a speech, you do something else, and this political culture has affected us in a very negative way. Gandhi says, in fact, what is civilization? Civilization is all about how you can reduce this gap between what you say and what you do. Who is a civilized person? You know, we believe that civilized person is a person with a tie and a good band, etc., with mobile phone. But civilization is all about what you say and what you do. The closeness between these two is civilization. So I think the political culture of this country need to drastically change. And that's the reason why social organizations were set up. To be frank, social organizations came to life because we thought we can model something different, and from our ways and methods, the politicians will learn. Unfortunately, rather than modeling ourselves, we also became an imitation of politicians in our organizations. You know, we also fight for power. We also backbite. We also pull people down. So our behavior didn't give a base for others to learn from. So this is a big challenge, and there are many interesting examples of how political people behave. I will just give you a small example of how impressed I was when I met the former president of Switzerland, Brutus. Ruth, yeah. So, Ruth, yeah. So, see, I called up and said, Ruth, I would like to come and see you. And she said, no, you don't have to come. I will come and see you. I'm a small social worker from India. She is president of Switzerland. And she comes she comes in a bus with a small bag, no policeman, no bodyguard. She comes only when she arrived. I understood this is Ruth, the former president of Switzerland. We sat and had half an hour discussion, etc. And I asked her that when you are so simple, what is the image that you are trying to convey? And she says, look, Rajagopal, this is the simplicity that people like. And when people watch me, they feel proud of Switzerland. And this is what we want to communicate, that we travel in bus, we are simple, we don't have all this bodyguard. So Gandhiji really wanted to teach us that. You know, when India became free, we thought all the Bapus and officials they were all packing. They knew when Bapu, the father of the nation, is in a hut, how can we live in a big house? But soon the culture changed. So the political culture of this country, not only in terms of speaking and acting, but corruption, the power show, and this is really sickening. So we have a big responsibility to change it. So let us come together to work for changing, because this is not a culture that can be presented to the world at large.
I think we're probably running short of time, so I don't want to go over time. What is your sense now? Should we just tie it up?
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
One minute.
Okay.
Rajaji, I am Harindralal here. There are a few more questions. We will send to you the questions, and you may send the answers, and we will transmit to the participants. Is it okay?
Okay. We will try. We will try. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. And now let me welcome Agila Gauri Shankar, representing Project Management Institute Kerala chapter for vote of thanks. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Aishwarya. It was a great session by Dr. Rajagopal sir and Jill ma'am. It was really the first Rajagopal sir laid out the basics and made us all really agree that yes, we want a value-based creation of society on non-violence. True. And he also convinced us that it is a lifestyle which can protect environment and governance and development model will benefit everyone. It is really true. And yes, it is never too late, as he said. It's really the change management, as always, is a difficult task. And especially if it is for attitudinal change, it's going to be a real task. Thank you, Jill ma'am, for this Jai Jagat campaign, explaining that how you are catching them young. And yes, it is the seeds that we put in the children, we can get the right output for the next generation. It's very true. Thank you so much for giving us the right path, saying that it is not a method, but it is a technique, true, to exemplify the nonviolent model of behavioral change. Yes, thank you so much for giving us the live examples, or the not examples actually, the live experiments that you are doing to bring in the real change that is required for this world. And there's no word to say thanks. It was really exciting. And thank you so much for highlighting us. Of course, we'll surely love to hear more, but of course, the short of time, we have to move on. And thank you so much from my side, the PMI Kerala chapter, and the chairman, Mr. Harindra Lal, the Inter-Society Activities Committee Kerala section, and leaders of the inter-societies, that is Institution of Engineers Kerala State Center, Computer Society of India Trivandrum chapter, the Internet Society Trivandrum chapter, Vakam Maulavi Foundation Trust Trivandrum, and IEEE Engineering in Medicine and Biology Kerala chapter. I propose the vote of thanks to you both. Thank you so much.